This morning, the committee welcomes John Phelan, Secretary of the Navy, Admiral James Kilby, Acting Chief of Naval Operations, and General Eric Smith, Commandant of the Marine Corps. We're grateful for their presence here today. I want to congratulate the Navy for turning a corner. Recruiting numbers are up significantly, and the Navy is on track to meet its fiscal year 2025 recruiting goal. This is especially significant because the goal is higher than it has been in 20 years. Notably, the department has shifted focus from divisive policies such as climate change and DEI. Renewed focus on warfighting and service contributes to these recent recruiting successes. This positive momentum provides an opportunity to raise recruiting standards and attract the highest caliber of warfighters our nation requires. In fact, if these recruitment trends continue, we could end up with too few ships for our sailors. Though we're making some improvements, Navy shipbuilding remains in an abysmal condition overall. And we're going to talk about that today. The previous administration tended to scapegoat industry, but the current administration is problem solving, canceling redundant contracts and reducing bureaucratic layers. President Trump's executive orders on federal acquisition reform, drawing from proposals in the Forged Act, are streamlining procurement to maximize every defense dollar. The Forged Act would empower the Navy to buy smarter and innovate faster, and I expect to see these provisions in this year's National Defense Authorization Act. The request falls far short of what we need to protect our country, though. I must say I am deeply disappointed with the administration's fiscal year 2026 budget request for the Navy. In particular, I'm disturbed about the shipbuilding account, which plummeted to $20.8 billion from last year's $37 billion. $20.8 billion down from last year's $37 billion. This shortfall reflects efforts to game the budget in anticipation of congressional reconciliation funds, which were intended as supplemental, not a substitute. I'm alarmed that this budget request does not include the procurement of a new destroyer. For several years now, it has been the practice to request 2 destroyers per year, with Congress adding a third in the odd-numbered year. The pattern is simple: 2 ships, then 3 ships, alternating each year. This provides orders to the shipyards to get us closer to the statutorily required 355 ships, required by statute. This year, funds were meant to cover the odd year from reconciliation, additional third ships for 2027 and 2029. They were not meant to replace the regular annual 2-ship request. This budget ignores that congressional ignores this congressional intent. Failing to include 2 destroyers in this year's budget request destabilizes industry, shows bad faith, and slows our shipbuilding efforts. Equally troubling is the omission of any Virginia-class submarine procurements. Here as well, the administration is relying on the 1 boat proposed in reconciliation. This would upend the multi-year negotiations that presume 9 boats over 5 years instead of 8. It jeopardizes industrial base recovery. Moreover, the Columbia-class program, critical for strategic deterrence, is underfunded by $4 billion. The number relies on unapproved authorities for incremental funding. The Shipbuilder Accountability and Workforce Support Initiative, SAWS, would enable 2 Virginia-class and 1 Columbia-class submarine annually. If we do SAWS, we could do 2 Virginias and 1 Columbia-class each year. Yet OMB opposes this and has created the crisis we now face. There's still time to implement SAWS, and I urge action to avoid further damage. The absence of Constellation-class frigates in the budget also raises serious questions. We'll discuss that during Q&A. Last year, we halted new procurements because of design instability. This year, the omission of 2 frigates signals severe problems with the program. I hope our witnesses clarify the frigate's future and how the Navy will sustain critical shipyard capacity in the event the program falters. Shipbuilding is not our only problem. The future of naval aviation faces significant challenges. The Navy continues to rely on the 30-year-old Super Hornet design as the mainstay of its carrier-based fleet, while capability gaps have been exacerbated with reduced F-35 orders. Compounding this, the F/A-XX sixth-generation fighter, intended to replace the aging Super Hornet, faces funding and schedule setbacks. The recent loss of 3 F/A-18s during a single deployment of the USS Truman underscores the operational strain on an aging fleet. There is $750 million proposed in the budget reconciliation to jumpstart this program. An announcement from the Navy will need to be made soon, Mr. Secretary, or we will risk further challenges to the industrial base. I recognize that the overall budgetary decisions were not made by the Navy, and I'm committed to a congressional solution to these shortfalls. The committee expects a clear plan to restore shipbuilding momentum, leverage Ford Act authorities, and ensure a fleet capable of deterring aggression in an increasingly contested world. Most members know that Senator Reid is attending a very important graduation ceremony this morning, and we congratulate him and his family. In his place, I'm delighted to recognize Senator Kaine, who will make opening remarks on behalf of the Democrats.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To my colleagues and to the witnesses, I echo many of the comments of Chairman Wicker about problems. Each of you are part of the solution, not part of the problem, and that will be our dialogue today. We meet to discuss the Navy's budget request for FY 2026, but we have yet to receive the full budget request from the administration. And this is quickly becoming the longest delayed budget submission in memory. I urge the White House to deliver it. My understanding in the FY 26 budget is the DoD will request an essentially flat budget for the Navy. Secretary Phelan, I want to ask for your assessment of the Navy's current posture and requirements for the coming year. I'm sure my colleagues will do the same. Before we discuss the current status of the Navy and Marine Corps, I want to make some comments on the deployment of Marines and National Guard to conduct law enforcement operations in Los Angeles. We have 2 SASC hearings this week. The second hearing is on CENTCOM posture, and this is the more appropriate time to make these comments. I have a lot of experience in dealing with the Guard as a former mayor and governor, and there are others on this panel who have been in that role. I have requested assistance from the National Guard. I have deployed the Virginia Guard primarily during weather emergencies and public safety instances as governor. I have visited Virginia Guard troops in combat zones in Iraq and Afghanistan and in other federal missions, such as the protection of the Capitol after January 6th. Most recently, I was with the Virginia Guard doing joint exercises with the Finnish Army as part of the State Partnership Program. The genius of the Guard is that it is a partnership between the President and the governors and Guardsmen and women. That partnership over centuries has really been the genius of the Guard. The President's decision to deploy thousands of Guardsmen and women to quell protest in Los Angeles without a request by the California governor, and in fact over the objection of the California governor, is nearly unprecedented. The last time the Guard was deployed to quell protest was in the aftermath of the Rodney King beating. That was at the request of the California governor. We are in very, very dangerous territory. I think my colleagues and I are right to be concerned about this. The American public is concerned about it. The state of California is filing litigation to challenge this misuse of power, and I suspect we'll be dealing with it in proposed amendments in the NDAA as well. Similarly, the Marines, to deploy active duty Marines to quell civilian protest is, in my view, very, very dangerous, a very dangerous precedent. And it's dangerous beyond the escalatory effects that both the governor and the mayor of Los Angeles are warning us about. If we screw up the balance of how we use the Guard or how we use the military in the instance of civilian protests that local law enforcement can handle, we will regret that for a very, very long time. And so I encourage my colleagues and I encourage the courts, we'll grapple with this and hopefully we can establish a balance that is not easily upset. The president's not a king. The military is not a palace guard. Last thing I'll say is this: if you're watching as a citizen, you are able to peacefully assemble and petition government for redress of grievances. It's in the First Amendment to the Constitution. And it's in there for a reason. It's not just to protect individuals' rights to express themselves. It's also because of a belief that a democratic government does better when people can peacefully express dissent. Free speech, free exercise of religion, free press, the ability to peacefully assemble and petition government for redress of grievances. The founders of this country believed that made government work better than suppressing dissenting voices. Many Americans are worried now that if they express dissenting voices to policies of the administration, they're concerned that the military may be deployed against them. And they notice a disharmony between a president who would not deploy the National Guard to protect the Capitol on January 6th, despite repeated requests by the mayor of D.C. and the head of the Capitol Police, because those protesters supported the president, and a president who deploys the Guard and Marines in the absence of a request and over the objection of the mayor of Los Angeles and the governor of California. I just want to say to any of you there who believe firmly in your First Amendment right to peacefully assemble and petition government for redress of grievances, that fully inhabiting that right in a peaceful way is more important now than it's been during my lifetime. We're coming up on the commemoration of 250 years of American democracy, and it's on the shoulders of this generation to decide whether the commemoration will be a celebration or a requiem or a wake or a coronation. We need to make it a celebration, and for that we need brave and patriotic citizens who are willing to, without fear, exercise rights that were guaranteed to them from the very first days of this country. The Navy does remain the finest maritime force in the world, but it's struggled to grow and maintain the fleet, and I needn't repeat comments that Senator Wicker made. Many vessels, aircraft carriers, multiple destroyers, and frigates, and some of the air platforms are behind schedule, in particular the Virginia-class fast attack subs, Columbia-class ballistic missile submarines, which are so critical and prioritized very highly by all of you, are delayed and face budgetary challenges. And other programs in both the private and public shipyards. We are doing a shipyard industrial infrastructure optimization program, investing heavily. That's showing some improvement. We need to do more. I continue to believe that the most significant challenge we have is a workforce challenge, and I would want to ask each of you about how you're grappling with the workforce challenges. The administration recently announced a major new shipbuilding initiative in the State of the Union address. I thought that was positive, being run by the National Security Council, but I understand that this office will focus primarily on commercial shipbuilding, not Navy vessels. And given the departure of many of the staff from the NSC who are expected to staff that initiative, I'm sort of wondering what your interaction has been with the White House and how they may add value to this problem we're trying to solve. General Smith, the Marine Corps continues to pursue your multi-year force design transformation effort with a focus on the Indo-Pacific. The Marine Corps is restructuring around expeditionary concepts that can provide a more flexible amphibious force. But to achieve it, you're focusing on a number of efforts: long-range fires, enhanced air and missile defense, improved ground and amphibious combat vehicles. But we continue to grapple with the question of the sufficiency of the amphibious fleet, and I think my colleagues and I will have some questions about that today. Finally, I will note that the President has failed to nominate a new Chief of Naval Operations since he abruptly dismissed Admiral Lisa Franchetti in February without explanation. I would welcome any guidance as to when the committee might receive a nomination for that critical importance. Thank you on to the witnesses, and Mr. Chair, since I'm going to be here, when we get on the Democratic side, I'm going to be deferring and letting other Democrats ask questions before me.
Thank you, Senator Kaine. I think we'll start opening remarks with Secretary Phelan and then proceed with Admiral Kilby and then General Smith. So, Mr. Secretary, you are recognized.
Microphone, please.
Okay, there we go.
All right.
There we go. Chairman Wicker, Senator Kane, distinguished members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today alongside General Smith and Admiral Kilby. I'm grateful to President Trump for the trust he's placed in me to lead this department and serve as the 79th Secretary of the Navy. I'm also grateful to this committee for my confirmation and for your continued support of our Navy Marine Corps team. Senators, my North Star as Secretary is readiness. Before a dollar is spent on any capability, an exquisite platform, or infrastructure, I will always ask the following question: what is the impact to our readiness? And does it increase or does it add to it? If the answer is no, we will not spend the dollar. As stated to this committee before, I'm focused on 3 priority areas. First, strengthening shipbuilding in the maritime industrial base. Second, fostering adaptive, accountable, and innovative warfighter culture. Third, improving the health, welfare, and training of our people, our sailors, Marines, and their families. Since my confirmation 2.5 months ago, I've been on a listening and learning tour. I've traveled across the country and visited some of our allies overseas. I visited our public, private, and overseas shipyards, as well as our installations, and I've met with many of our sailors, Marines, and shipyard workers. What I've learned is this: we are still the dominant naval power, but our adversaries are closing the gap at a concerning, accelerating rate. We need to make important cultural and strategic changes in order to maintain our competitive advantage. And we need to address a culture, one riddled with bureaucratic decision-making and gold-plated requirements, that is endemic to this department. Because there is no doubt we are operating in a world that is more hostile and unpredictable. As evidenced by recent conflicts, warfare as we know it is changed dramatically. China is no longer just a pacing threat, it is our primary competitor, both economically and militarily. With their naval fleet nearing 400 ships, China's goal is not defense of its homeland only, it is the forward projection of power and influence. In the Indo-Pacific, our Navy Marine Corps team is deepening cooperation with our allies and partners to strengthen deterrence and keep open our sea lines of communication. At home, they are supporting homeland defense through Task Force Zapper, providing surveillance, logistics, and manpower at the southern border. And in the Red Sea, they've defeated scores of missiles and drones from Iranian-backed Houthis, helped defend our regional allies, and guaranteed access to a major artery of global trade. Our global presence sends a clear message to the world. The United States Navy and Marine Corps are prepared and ready to fight and win anytime and anywhere. However, our naval superiority is under threat. For too long, we've allowed our shipbuilding industry to erode, hollowing out the very capacity we need to maintain credible naval deterrence. That must change. Rebuilding our maritime industrial base is not just a matter of economic policy, it is a national security imperative. President Trump's executive order on restoring America's maritime dominance highlights that urgency and puts us on the right path. I've been to 10 shipyards, 7 here in the United States and 3 overseas. And I've spoken directly with shipyard leaders and hardworking tradesmen essential to our maritime operations. I now have a clear picture of our challenges and am developing a plan to fix what's broken. We do need to act with urgency, and this will take a whole-of-government approach to rebuild our capacity and expertise. We are developing a deliberate, actionable plan to restore our industrial base, but we cannot do it alone. Congress, private industry, and the Department of the Navy must work collaboratively if we are serious about ensuring our naval superiority. In closing, it is clear that our greatest asset is the extraordinary men and women who serve, our sailors and Marines. We will continue to invest in them through smarter recruitment, better training, and targeted retention efforts to retain top-tier talent. And we will prioritize quality of service initiatives to ensure that our sailors, Marines, and their families have the resources they need. Thank you. Very much appreciated.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary. And if you could slide your microphone over to Admiral Kilby, we will recognize him. Admiral, We're delighted to have you, and you are recognized.
Chairman Wicker, distinguished members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify on the posture of the United States Navy. Your Navy provides our nation with sea power and sea control needed to preserve our way of life and ensure our security and prosperity. Your oversight and funding ensure we are ready when the nation calls. I'm pleased to testify alongside Secretary Phelan, who brings needed and unique set of skills and experiences to help us accelerate the work of our Navy, and alongside my partner, General Smith, the Commandant of the Marine Corps. In the past year, our sailors have defeated hundreds of drones, missiles, and executed dozens of offensive strikes from the Mediterranean in the Red Sea and the Eastern Mediterranean. They have strengthened alliances and deterred Chinese aggression in the Western Pacific, and they have supported operations on the southern border. And they have maintained an unbroken strategic deterrent with our ballistic missile submarines. In short, the Navy, integrated with the Joint Force, remains postured and ready to fight and win. We remain committed to a strong global Navy, one that is prepared to defend our homeland, deter our adversaries, and prevail in war. We are laser focused on China as our most consequential opponent while strengthening the defense of the homeland. We prioritize our operations, training, and readiness accounts to ensure our naval forces remain ready, resilient, and able to execute national tasking. The Navy and the Marine Corps preserves peace through strength, through investments in our strategic deterrence, our defense industrial base, our installations, via initiatives like the Shipyard Infrastructure Optimization Program. Most importantly, we are continuing our strong commitment to our people, our sailors, our Navy families, and our civilians through pay raises and investments in quality service initiatives such as unaccompanied housing and childcare. But we are facing some challenges. First, our platforms are not as ready as they need to be. We set an ambitious goal to make 80% of our ships, submarines, and aircraft combat surge ready by 1 January 2027. To do that, we are reducing maintenance delays and improving manning, training, and modernization and sustainment. Second, the Navy has 22,950 gaps at sea. Thanks to process improvements and targeted investments, we are on plan to reduce that number significantly by the end of 2026. We are committed to attracting and developing Americans who innovate, solve hard problems, and dominate in combat. The Navy contracted over 40,000 sailors last year, the most since 2003, and we are currently on pace to exceed our recruiting goal in 2025. And third, our ordnance expenditures in the Red Sea have highlighted the strain on our munitions industrial base. The Navy is working with both our traditional primes and new entrants to close this gap, developing kinetic and non-kinetic weapons at speed and at scale. In all these efforts, consistent and predictable funding is foundational. We appreciate the continued support of this committee. In closing, I'm proud of our Navy's accomplishments in the past year, and I'm excited about the growing consensus that is powering our maritime rejuvenation. This whole of government and whole of nation effort is essential to our security and prosperity. We have work to do to ensure that we will remain the premier maritime force for another 250 years. Your leadership and support are critical to achieving this imperative. On behalf of the sailors, civilians, and families around the world of the Navy, thank you. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Admiral. General Smith, you're recognized.
Well, good morning, Chairman Wicker, Senator Kane, ladies and gentlemen. I'm honored to appear before you alongside Secretary Phelan and Admiral Kilby, my shipmate, to represent your Marine Corps. I'm going to keep my comments short so I can answer your questions. First, I'd like to start by sharing the Marine Corps' top 3 priorities. First, restoring a 3.0 amphibious ready group Marine Expeditionary Unit presence. This is the Marine Corps' North Star. That simply means 1 Marine Expeditionary Unit constantly deployed off the East Coast, 1 constantly deployed off the West Coast, and 1 episodically deployed out of Okinawa, Japan, the FDNF, the Forward Deployed Naval Force. The amphibious ready group with the Marine Expeditionary Unit embarked is the most versatile tool in the nation's arsenal. It's the Swiss Army knife of the Joint Force. We're working closely with our Navy partners to maximize this capability. Our second priority is accelerating force design. Force design is our journey to adapt to the changing character of war. We're in the implementation phase, fielding new capabilities and reshaping formations across the force, from our Marine Expeditionary Units and Marine Littoral Regiments to our Marine Expeditionary Forces. And finally, improving the quality of life of our Marines. Every Marine deserves a clean, safe place to lay their head down at night. They don't ask for much, but they do ask for that. This is the most consequential housing investment, Barracks 2030, in our history. And the quality of life goes beyond our barracks. We're also investing in the well-being of Marine families, because you recruit the Marine and you retain the family. Because retaining our Marines means supporting those who stand beside them. I'll close with this. Your Marines remain the most ready when the nation is least ready. It's our mantra, it's who we are, it's what we do. We're a forward-postured force, trained for combat, and built to deliver flexible, lethal options anytime, anywhere. Thank you again for the trust and support that you've placed in the Marine Corps. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much to all three of you for your testimony and for your service. Secretary Phelan, you've made it clear in your opening statement that the number of ships we presently have is inadequate, that the strength of our industrial base is inadequate and headed in the wrong direction, particularly as compared to what has been called our pacing threat, and which Admiral Kilby actually used stronger language to describe. Admiral Kilby, you said that the Navy must be ready when the nation calls. And I think I take from your testimony, combined with that of Secretary Phelan, that if the current trend continues, we will not be ready when the nation calls, although you're doing your best with what we have. General Smith, let's talk about amphibious ship readiness, to be specific. The GAO report just last December highlighted that 16 of the 32 amphibious ships are in poor material condition. Those are the exact words, poor material condition, because of deferred maintenance, obsolete steam propulsion systems, and shortages of spare parts. You went even further, General, calling this a crisis, and instead of 16 of 32, you noted 3 months ago that only 13 of 32 ships were seaworthy as of March of this year, far below the 80% readiness rate needed to meet congressionally mandated 31-ship minimum to support 3.0 amphib ready group Marine Expeditionary Unit requirements. Have I misstated anything, General Smith?
No, sir, you are correct, although I would note that Admiral Kilby is working mightily to improve that readiness.
Absolutely, and we want to work with you on that. How is okay? Thank you for the compliment, and I know y'all are shoulder to shoulder. But how is the Navy supporting readiness of the amphibious warfare fleet? And I'll let you continue the compliment, and then we'll toss it back to Admiral Kilby.
Senator, what I would say is the Optimized Fleet Response Plan, OFRP, I will not speak for Admiral Kilby, but it is the plan to get the amphib readiness fleet up to standard, get it up to its 80% readiness rate.
There's no time to waste, is there, General Smith?
No, sir.
Admiral Kilby?
Sir, just maybe a quick correction. Our goal of 80% combat surge ready is for those ships, aircraft, and submarines not in the depot availability. Right now, I will tell you that we are at 67 for aviation. That includes aircraft carriers, 67%, 72% for submarines, and 61% for crudes. The amphibious ships are below that, and I'm calling that out to focus with the two type commanders, Admiral McLean and Admiral Cahill on the East Coast.
Is the requirement below that for amphibs?
It is not.
Okay,
No, sir.
so the requirement is 80% for amphibs, too.
It is, yes, sir.
Let me be quick here and get to one other issue, and you can supplement your answer, Admiral. But General Smith, let me ask you about landing ship medium, LSMs. If you could briefly describe what they will do in getting our servicemen to the islands, and would you be supportive of a block buy of these ships?
Well, Senator, I'm always supportive of block buys because they save the American taxpayer money and they reinforce the workforce. They give them a sense that there's going to be continued work in the shipyards. And the one thing we can't lose is our workforce.
Okay, and so how valuable will they be should something happen, particularly, say, in the Indo-Pacific?
The landing ship medium is vital to us, sir. It's our inter-island connector. It's what enables us to disperse and reaggregate the force rapidly and to do so in a nondescript manner to keep ourselves below the threshold of noticeability by the adversary to deliver lethal capabilities.
Is there an existing design which we could begin production on very quickly?
There are a couple that we're looking at, sir, but what we require is a purpose-built ship, something that can be shallow drafted, carry marine missile batteries, carry Marines, and distribute themselves across the first island chain with enough range and capability to get the job done.
And are there ships ready right now that could do that?
Sir, I would say there are not ships that are currently fully capable of executing, but there are some ships that can be used as surrogates on the way to a spiral development to a purpose-built ship.
What would be the alternative to using them right now? How many years would we have to wait for the so-called purpose-built ship?
I can't give you an exact number of years that we would have to wait, sir, but it's more than 2.
There may be some questions for the record
Sure.
on that issue. Thank you very much. Senator Kane, you are recognized.
Prior to recognizing Senator Blumenthal, Mr. Chair, I'd like to ask to introduce the statement of Senator Reed prepared for today into the record.
Without objection.
Senator Blumenthal.
Thanks. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Senator Kane. Thank you, gentlemen, for your service to our nation and your being here this morning. And I want to reiterate some of the points that my colleague, Senator Kane, made. I'm deeply, deeply concerned about the use of our National Guard and our Marines, essentially in what appears to be law enforcement and crowd control. It threatens our civil rights and civil liberties directly contrary to the doctrine of posse comitatus, which is at the core of our constitutional protections. These active duty military are being used essentially to do crowd control and to potentially use force against fellow Americans, which is exactly what the founders wanted to prevent through this doctrine, and that Congress sought to prevent through the Insurrection Act. Unfortunately, the Insurrection Act is fraught with weaknesses that, in effect, give the president unbridled power. I will introduce later today reforms to the Insurrection Act that limit the president's power with safeguards and guardrails for the purpose of protecting our constitutional rights, but also, frankly, protecting our military. And that's the main point I want to make today. I consider the use of the military in this way a risk to our national security at a time when we need more support and more credibility for the kinds of complicated and challenging tasks we ask our men and women in uniform to do. This escalatory and inflammatory use of military men and women against their fellow citizens threatens to be a stain on their honor and a blow to their support and credibility among Americans. The sight of Marines taking potential force against fellow Americans, Commandant Smith, I regard as deeply dangerous to our Marine Corps. These Marines have no training in crowd control, do they?
Senator, the Marines that have deployed do have crowd control training.
Where did they do that crowd control?
They did that at their home station at 29 Palm, sir.
You said that they're trained for combat. They're being deployed for, in effect, law enforcement, aren't they?
So they're being deployed to support law enforcement.
But the task that they are being assigned to do is not central to their mission as Marines.
Senator, I would say that all Marines are trained in crowd control, embassy reinforcement, et cetera. So this is part of their training, sir.
All Marines are trained in crowd control?
Sir, a standard Marine Expeditionary Unit before they deploy is trained, and this battalion was ready for that.
And what kinds of equipment do they have?
Sir, they have shields and batons.
And do they have the kinds of arrest powers that police would have? Do they have the kinds of authorities that are necessary for crowd control?
Sir, they do not have arrest authority. They are there to protect federal property and federal personnel.
Wouldn't you agree that there's the danger they will use the kind of lethal force that you've just described as their central mission to deliver, and that there could be injuries and deaths as a result?
Senator, I am not concerned. I have great faith in my Marines and their junior leaders and their more senior leaders to execute the lawful tasks that they're given.
I have great faith in the Marine Corps when they are assigned to do what is their central mission. I am deeply worried about the effect of the use of Marines or National Guard in a way that could inflame and incite rather than calm tensions. Marines are trained to be a lethal force, as you have said, and that is known by the people who are going to be in those streets. And I'm deeply concerned about the stain on the honor of the Marine Corps that could result, and the loss of support and credibility for exactly the kinds of increasing support for the industrial base, better living conditions, and other challenges that we have and that require more commitment, Mr. Secretary. My time has expired. Thank you.
Senator Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, Admiral, General, welcome. Thank you for being here today, and thank you for your service to our country. I am deeply concerned with the health of our munitions stockpiles, including those affected by recent operations in the Red Sea. Large numbers of missiles, such as the Tomahawk land attack missile, were expended during these operations. We are expending missiles far faster than we are producing them. We have a real opportunity to make progress on this through reconciliation, but the Navy's future-based budgets must also account for increased production rates. Mr. Secretary, at your confirmation hearing, you talked about working to incentivize companies and reviewing Navy munition contracts. What have you discovered in your review of these munitions production contracts?
Senator, thank you for the question. I have yet to review munitions contracts. I have been dealing with shipbuilding and contracts for the most part. Munitions is next. But what I would say is that fully funding our munitions industrial base is critical and very important. And I have visited 2 other companies at this stage that are 3D printing different types of munitions that I think have a lot of potential. And so I think we need to make sure that we are looking at both existing and new ways of making munitions. So that will be critical to us in the future. But this is a very important thing. It's something that Admiral Kilby and the Commandant and I talk about weekly when we go through our meetings. So it is critical, and munitions is next up on the list.
Thank you. We'll have to talk when you get an update on that, please. Admiral, are there any specific actions that you think need to be taken to increase that production capacity for the munitions for the Navy?
Senator, thanks for that question. I agree with Secretary Phelan. I think we have to, expand my view of what is potential solutions for us to include vendors that aren't traditionally in this space. We do need to double down on traditional munitions like SM-6, SM-2, LRASM, conventional prompt strike when it delivers, maritime strike Tomahawk, all critical in this fight. And as you point out, we're using them at a rate we hadn't anticipated because of the Red Sea.
Are you concerned that too many of our programs rely on sole sources and that diminishes, obviously, then competition?
I don't know if I am concerned about the lack of competition in the industrial base for munitions. I think we must do better there. Even if it is producing a missile that isn't quite as effective as the SM-6, that's better than zero missile in your magazine. So I think we've got work to do there, and I'm committed to do that work with Secretary Phelan.
Great, thank you. Mr. Secretary, I'm also deeply concerned about the delays in the Columbia-class production timeline. Since taking office, what have you discovered regarding the pervasive delays in the Columbia-class program?
Thank you, Senator, for the question. As you know, Columbia is a priority for us and for you, obviously, in the committee. I think there are a number of different issues we've come across. One is, you mentioned the topic of single source builders. We also have that in supplies, which is potentially a problem. So we do need to expand out the industrial base. I think some of it has been, I've visited both Quonset and Groton and have gone there. I think that there is issues that can be done to increase productivity much faster. And I've spoken with the CEOs of both of those companies about my visit there and what I learned. I believe that we will start to see an increase. We are trying to shift the schedule left, and there are a few different things we are trying right now.
Okay.
In addition, we have, at the direction of the Deputy Secretary of Defense, we have sent in a group to try to help them analyze workflow processes and those sorts of things as well.
Thank you. Admiral, I wanted to ask you, because of the delays we're seeing on the Columbia class, I know the Navy's been working to extend the hulls of some of the existing Ohio class. How's that going?
I think we're in a good shape. That's a good insurance policy. Obviously, we want to get Columbia out there because it has a capability beyond our Ohio's, but we have the ability to extend 7 of those through an availability called a PIRA, which I believe will make sure that we maintain our strategic component from the Navy.
Great. I will have some questions for follow-up for all 3 of you gentlemen. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Senator King.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, Mr. Secretary, I want to thank you for your visits to the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard and Bath Iron Works, particularly for the time you took to talk with the men and women on the deck plates, the people who are out there doing the work. It meant a lot to those people and meant a lot to the workforce. And the fact that you took the time to do that, I think, is exemplary. The other thing I want to note at the beginning, we always get in these hearings, there's a lot of criticism and harsh questions. I want to compliment the Navy for the performance in the Red Sea. It's the longest protracted naval battle since World War II. And the Navy has performed extraordinarily well. I've had briefings both in this committee and the Intelligence Committee about the work that's been done under very difficult circumstances. So I think that should be acknowledged in a hearing like this. I should also note that some of the workhorses in the Red Sea are DDGs, which are, I remember visiting a government facility some years ago where that had a spot on the map of the whole world of all of U.S. assets, and DDGs were all over that map. They're truly the workhorse of the Navy, and that brings me to my more difficult question, which is the shipbuilding budget being cut in half in the base budget. Those of us who've been on this committee for some time remember OCO. It seems like this is son of OCO, where we're using the reconciliation to do what ought to be in the base budget. The problem with it not being in the base budget, Mr. Secretary, is the message that sends to industry in terms of planning and long-term commitments, investments. And I realize that the brooding omnipresence here is OMB, but I hope that you can advocate for the strengthening of the base budget on shipbuilding, because all the talk about building up ships and then having shipbuilding cut in half doesn't jibe. Your thoughts?
Thank you for the question, Senator King. Look, the president is committed to a strong national defense and to shipbuilding, and I do believe the OMB director is as well. My team continues to work closely with the Secretary of Defense's office and OMB in order to try to prioritize and get these programs going. I think we are moving in a good direction, and I am hopeful that we will get something out that
Well,
meet our
I hope
needs.
so. A wise old New Englander once said, "Your actions speak so loudly, I can't hear your words." So not being in the base budget, I think, is a real problem, both in terms of the practicality of it, but also for the message that it sends to the defense and industrial base. You talked about availability, and this is something I've been working on for some time. The average availability of Navy ships, and it varies. Amphibs are below 50%. Some, as you mentioned, are around 70%, but the average is around 50%. The average availability of Carnival Cruise Lines is 93%. If Carnival Cruise Lines had 50% of their ships offline at any given moment, they'd be out of business. And I don't think that's enough. I mean, I understand the complexity of the ships is different and all of those kinds of things, but we ought to be thinking about a much higher level of availability. Admiral, how do we get to that 80% number? Everybody talks about it, but we're not very close to it overall.
Well, a couple things, sir. One, let me just take overall, I think shorter avails with a definitized package where we can lock down planning 90 or 120 days in advance of that avail so we can order the parts and align the workforce is the key. That means we have to be disciplined to do that, and we have to do our open-ended specs where we go assess the condition of the ship early enough to inform that package.
And there's software now that can predict part failure, and there's a lot of technology involved in higher levels of availability.
Yes, sir. In fact, these open-ended specs now can be conducted. I don't have to drain a fuel oil tank. I can just use some advanced technology to go look at that tank and assess it to whether it needs to be done or not. So we've done that with the case of USS America, which is an amphibious ship. We had 191 open-ended specs that were going to be done in the avail. We pulled them far left of the avail so we can make sure we accurately predict that package.
We'll keep having these hearings, and I'm going to keep asking about availability until we really hit more like an 80% number, because that would solve a lot of our problems.
Yes, sir.
We'd have more ships in the ocean, not to mention submarines and others. Final point, directed energy. It's unclear in the budget where the directed energy money is, if it's in there. Those missiles that we're using in the Red Sea to knock down $20,000 Yemen drones cost $4 million apiece. Directed energy is an incredibly important priority. The prior administration grossly underfunded it. I hope this administration will pay attention. This is cost-effective, and it's the weapon of the future. Mr. Secretary, are you going to advocate for directed energy and see an increase in that budget?
Yes, Senator. I think it's a very important capability, and as you mentioned, it's a cost-effective one. We continue to be working very hard, and we've one system we've been testing live right now that appears to be working well, and so we continue to work on that. So yes.
Let's get that system into the Red Sea. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator King. Let me say this, Admiral Kilby. I want to request that you take some time and supplement your answer to Senator King about what happens differently in the private sector. I think the senator mentioned a cruise line, and you answered, and of course we only have 5 minutes per senator at this hearing. But this has a lot to do with the Forged Act, which our Defense Department is already trying to implement, and much of which will be in the NDAA. But the point that private industry somehow figures out a way to be flexible enough, and whatever laws govern them allows them to be flexible enough, and we haven't been able up to this point fully to implement that sort of thing for our fleet is I think, fundamental to this hearing and what we're trying to do to address some of the statistics that we've mentioned. Will you do that, sir?
I will do that, and I will also tell you that we've had an ongoing relationship with Carnival Cruise Line. We just sent a group of folks down there to watch them do an availability in 8 hours. Cruise ship pulls in, tourists leave. 8 hours later, tourists get on board and they get underway. So we're
Okay,
trying to
well,
understand that better, and I'll put that in my answer to you,
Well,
sir.
please help us understand that, and we want to give you what you need to get to the sort of result that we're talking about. And thank you, and I appreciate the committee indulging me. And Senator Cotton has appeared and is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Before I get to matters of bipartisan concern on things like shipbuilding and munitions, I'm compelled to respond to the unhinged partisan rants by Senator Kaine and Senator Blumenthal about the riots in Los Angeles. I heard a lot of complaints about the use of the National Guard or the Marine Corps to defend federal property. Not surprisingly, a lot of attacks on Donald Trump. I don't think I heard condemnation of rioters and looters and arsonists and revolutionary anarchists that are burning down parts of Los Angeles. So let's put it in context. What's happening in Los Angeles? For 4 years under Joe Biden, we had a slow motion invasion of this country by millions of migrants, to include murderers, rapists, gang members, and other depraved savages. It wasn't just tolerated by Democrats in the Senate, it was celebrated. The American people spoke very clearly last year. They elected Donald Trump and a Republican Congress to secure the border, to enforce our immigration laws, and to deport violent, illegal aliens. That's exactly what our brave immigration authorities started doing on Friday. You have illegal aliens that were rounded up in Los Angeles that had committed heinous, violent crimes. Are we simply supposed to overlook them because they're in a Democratic city or a Democratic state? You can sexually assault children as an illegal alien, but if you're standing outside a Home Depot as a day laborer, immigration authorities are not supposed to arrest you and remove you from the streets to protect innocent civilians. And then what happened? Again, anarchists, revolutionaries, left-wing street militias started attacking law enforcement with bricks and cement and frozen water bottles, spitting in their faces, or much worse, setting cars on fire, looting buildings, setting buildings on fire. Under these conditions, of course, we should always want the local police to be the first line of authority, and they usually can restore order. In Los Angeles, they could not. How do we know? The Los Angeles Police Department chief told us that his forces were overwhelmed, even as he kept them on all after their shift. The next line of defense against such civil disorder is the National Guard. You would expect a responsible governor, when one of his city's police forces are overwhelmed, to call out the National Guard. But the incompetent and ideological governor of California refused to do so. So President Trump had to act. He has clear legal authority to federalize the Guard when necessary to protect innocent life and property, and especially federal officers and federal property. That's exactly what he did. Just like, for instance, in my state in 1957, when the racist Democratic governor tried to use the National Guard to prevent the desegregation of Little Rock Central High School. And President Eisenhower said, I don't think so, and federalized the Guard to ensure the desegregation of Little Rock Central. And what did the governor of California do? Rather than recognize the error of his ways and cooperate and try to restore order in California, he began grandstanding, attacking the president, suing the federal government for using the National Guard to restore order, which again is one of its functions. Now, the third line of defense, as Senator Blumenthal referenced, is the Insurrection Act, the use of active duty troops to restore order. The president has taken a measured approach so far. He has said he doesn't think it's necessary to do so, but he will use that venerable law, which goes back nearly to the beginning of our republic, if called for, as it was, for instance, in the 1992 LA riots. Now again, we all hope that these riots are stopped, that these outlaws and renegades are arrested and prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. But the president has a constitutional responsibility to protect innocent lives, to defend federal officers, and to defend federal property, which is exactly what the Marines were sent to Los Angeles to do. Not to engage in crowd control, not to engage in civilian arrests, but to protect federal property. Now, my time has expired, so I won't get to address some of the important issues that you came here to speak about, gentlemen. But I do want to express my thanks to the California Guard and to the Marines that are currently trying to perform the simple responsibility of protecting federal officers, federal property, and help the local police restore order in Los Angeles.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Senator Kane is next.
Well, just to respond, the issue is not, is there lawless behavior that can be controlled by local law enforcement? You either believe in a federal system or you don't, where a governor requests the National Guard or doesn't, and you either believe in a civilian military division or you don't. Now, President Trump has addressed this topic in September of 2020. Look, we have laws. We have to go by the laws. We can't move in the National Guard. I can call insurrection, but there's no reason to ever do that. Even in a Portland case, we can't call in the National Guard unless we're requested by a governor. I'll set aside all the ad hominem partisan attacks and just say this. Senator Cotton brings up the example of Little Rock. President Eisenhower, Republican president, did federalize the Guard in that instance. Why? Because it was the governor that was violating federal law. There is no suggestion that Governor Newsom is violating federal law. In fact, he said, arrest me if I'm violating the law. And yesterday, the chief border agent for the United States said, there is no cause to arrest you. You are not violating federal law. And so the right balance in this instance is to let a local official, mayor, governor, seek assistance if they need it. If the president decides more assets are needed, we wouldn't even be having this discussion if he said in federal law enforcement, FBI, DEA, federal law enforcement. We're having this discussion because the president, in an unprecedented way, without a request and over the objection of the local elected leadership, has sent in the United States military, and that is unprecedented. General Smith, I want to just compliment you. You listed 3 pillars of the area you're working on, and number 3 was quality of life. Yesterday, I was at Yorktown Naval Base, and I visited your Marine Corps Security Force Regiment to see advances they're making on Barracks 2030, and it was very, very impressive. And I told them that this is a real template for what we ought to be looking at Marine-wide and DOD-wide, and I just wanted to compliment you on that. To Secretary Phelan and Admiral Kilby, Senator Fisher has asked you about Columbia class. I was going to ask, but normally just focus on, can you talk about where we are in trying to get Virginia class production up to speed?
Yeah, I'll start, sir. We're not where we want to be, and we're not satisfied with it. We're at a 1.1 when we need to be on a 2.0 pace for us and 2.33 for the ultimate goal here with the AUKUS program.
And just the timing of that, we need to be at 2.33 kind of in the early to mid-30s if we're going to, be able to meet the commitments that we've made to the Aussies who've invested in our workforce to do that. Isn't that right?
That's correct, sir.
We have a heavy lift, 1.1 to 2.3 within 10 years.
Yes, sir. I do think there's been a bunch of investments that we've enjoyed because of your approval in the maritime industrial base and the submarine industrial base in particular that I believe will help us here. But we do need the prime contractors to deliver and sequence work and get it done and focus on productivity, just as Secretary Phelan laid out.
Let me ask you this, Admiral Kilby. There's been a lot of attention to a couple of the mishaps in the Truman Carrier Strike Group, but the group did such good work. We had a committee briefing about this last week, and I think some of the positives of the work that was done under very difficult circumstances haven't really been described. Could you share with the committee?
I certainly can, sir. Thank you. I was privileged to go out and visit that strike group returning home the day before, 2 days before she returned home. Just to kind of give you a quick soundbite, that strike group defended themselves, other ships, or other countries 160 times successfully. They conducted 670 strikes into Somalia, either from the air or from the land. They conducted the largest single airstrike ever launched from a carrier with 124,000 pounds of munitions that detonated within 2 minutes of each other in Somalia. They participated in 8 named operations. They worked for 3 different combatant commanders. They did great work for our nation. And
they did not just the nation, but the world. They really did good work. I have some questions about why other allies didn't do more, but I'm glad that we did what we did. Finally, Secretary Phelan, I've been hearing good reviews of your traveling around to the shipyards, and you talked about it a little bit, but what would be some insights that you have about on the procurement side in terms of improvements that you believe you want to explore further based upon your tours thus far?
Thank you for the question, Senator. Look, I think some of it is how we contract things, how we locate things in terms of where our vendors are, in terms of proximity to shipyards. I think we have to really look at the manufacturing process of modules and what we're doing. I think in the next Virginia class, we have to really consider having HII build and EV build versus the two of them co-building. I think we need to introduce some competition back into the system. And I think one of the issues we've dealt with, particularly with Virginia, is some of these boats were first of class. Even though it looks the same, it's very different. I think we're getting over that curve and learning faster. And I think candidly, it's just, one of the things I would say, interestingly, every company I met with, every public shipyard I was at, they all bragged about their training. But when I sat down with all the workers, the one thing they said they didn't have really good was training. And so I think there are better ways to train them and get them in there and get them up to speed faster. And these are things we're all looking at.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Senator Rounds.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First to all 3 of you, thank you for your service to our country. General Smith, I just want to touch on one item very quickly and just, you laid out very clearly to some questioning earlier the current situation with regard to the Marines that are currently in California, that the President has identified. I believe you have approximately 2,000 of them. Is that correct, sir?
We've actually got 700 Marines from 2nd Battalion, 7th Marines, sir.
Okay. And in their current position, do you consider them, what position are they in? Are they mobilized, or are they, what's the appropriate terminology that you would use for their current status?
Sir, I would say that they are there at the SecDef's direction to NORTHCOM. It's one of our most ready battalions. They're prepared to respond to lawful orders from their chain of command. They're there to protect federal property and federal officers.
Have they been called into that into that operation yet?
Sir, I would defer you to the commander of NORTHCOM for that.
Okay. When they come in to do this, they have not engaged at all at this stage of the game.
That is correct, sir.
Okay.
The only time that they would engage is if properties are, or individual other members of the armed services are being threatened. Is that accurate, sir?
That is correct, sir.
So they're in a defensive posture right now, but they're available as a reserve force.
That is correct, sir. And again, I would defer to the Northcom commander for their employment.
Thank you. I just want to make it clear that the purpose for them being there is not necessarily for law enforcement, but it is there to protect other members of the military or federal properties. Is that accurate?
Sure, that is their mission.
Which is exactly what it would be if they were in another part of the sovereignty, which we would have, which would be at any embassy, any place in the world.
Basically, sure.
Okay, thank you. Secretary Phelan, just a thought. You're brand new in the job, more or less. I have asked, I guess, almost every time we've had one of these types of setups in front of us about a submarine called the USS Boise. And I think it's just a great example, an unfortunate example of what happens when either you don't have the budget or you don't have the facilities, but it's kind of like that parakeet that you take into a mine, and it basically suggests that maybe things aren't all right. The USS Boise was originally commissioned in 1992. It's a nuclear attack sub, and it was taken out of service in 2015. And since that time, it has been in different phases of either a dry dock or sitting at dock. Right now, the most current plan is that it will not go back into service until 2029. There's something wrong with this. Just compared to how long it takes us to build a brand new sub today, this has been sitting there now, and it's going to be 14 years of not being in service. Have you had a chance to look at that operation, or have you had a chance to look and see just what's going on there?
Thank you for the question, Senator. I know important to you. I have not on that specific one, but let me speak kind of in general about this. Our maintenance times, this all comes back to the point of urgency. We don't seem to have that sense of urgency that we need. We don't, in the manufacturing and construction and maintenance business, there's one thing, Senator King talks about Carnival Cruise Line, there's one word, schedule. If you don't hit schedule, you get killed. And we don't seem to hold the schedule. And I think there are a number of reasons why. Some of that's the supply base, some of that's green workers, some of that's not having enough workers, some of that's taking workers and shifting them to other jobs. There are a lot of things that we aren't doing that are not very smart. I went to Korea, I went to Hanwha, I went to Hyundai Heavy Industries, I went to 2 shipyards in Japan. The Japanese in 1 8-hour shift get done what we get done in 2.5 shifts. It is not because they are so much better. They are more experienced, yes, but like you speak to a welder in Japan or Korea, they spend 0 time on paperwork. I have yet to find a single shipyard where it's not between 35 and 50% of their time is filling out paperwork. These are things that need to change. We need to modernize and design. So these maintenance, as you're talking about, this is a huge problem. If you have a ship in a yard, in my opinion, for more than a year or 2 years, pretty hard to get it back in the water.
Yeah, we can't be spending 14 years trying to take it to its second life. It's just can't be done anymore.
I agree.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And we look forward to your suggestions about specifically how to deal with the paperwork issue, Mr. Secretary. Senator Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So for years, giant defense contractors have been sneaking fine print into contracts that prevents sailors and Marines from maintaining their own equipment. These restrictions increase costs, they hurt readiness, and they make a lot of money for the contractors. During your confirmation process, Secretary Phelan, you committed to, quote, explore how to best leverage right to repair and technical data rights within acquisition contracts to enable organic repair capacity. I wrote it down. So I want to make sure that that maintains as a priority. Marines in Okinawa, Japan had to send back engines to contractors in the U.S. for repairs, a process that took months when the Marines could have done it themselves on site. But they had to do that because that is what the contract said. And when it's a ship, the United States government actually foots the bill to send the contractor out to sea. GAO found that travel costs to have a contractor complete repairs for one order on the USS Montgomery in Singapore would cost about $1.2 million. That's just for the travel costs. So Secretary Phelan, would you agree that the Navy could be using those millions of dollars to train service members on the skills they need so they could fix their own equipment rather than spending that money to fly contractors to provide tech support?
Senator, thank you for the question. I know it's very important to you. What we do makes no sense to me, okay? And so I am a huge supporter of right to repair. I went on the Ford carrier. They had 8 ovens. This is a ship that serves 15,300 meals a day. Only 2 were working.
Oh, geez.
6 were out. And I said, you've got 5,300 people on the ship. You're telling me someone can't fix an oven? We got a lot of engineers. We can, but we need to wait for the contractor to get out. I asked the question about our elevators. If an elevator go out, what happens? We've got to call Huntington. They've got to call the 4 other people. They have to come out and diagnose the problem, and then they'll fix it. It is crazy. We should be able to fix this. And my other hot button, which I know is another one of yours in this committee's, is IP and our intellectual property rights. We end up paying for a lot of things that we don't control, and we need to change that. Wow. And so contracting in general is something we're looking at very hard, and we need to really try to ensure going forward we control our IP and we have the ability to fix things, because if we're in a fight, how do we fix it then?
You have this so right. The importance not only of doing it on a day-by-day basis, but you need all of that muscle memory of how to fix things in case you're under much more adverse circumstances and don't have time to let something lie there unused while you try to fly in somebody from halfway around the world. So let me just make sure I've got you on the record here. Do you agree that the Navy needs to negotiate for comprehensive repair rights so that contractors cannot find shady ways both to insist on their ability to do the repairs, but also to keep the data that you need away from you so that you can't do it yourself?
Senator, I agree we need to have the right to repair our ships. How we specifically go about that, I need to look at and understand better. But trust me, you and I are simpatico on this.
Okay, and then I will ask you, while we're being so simpatico here, let me ask you one more. Do you support Congress passing a law that will help you negotiate repair rights at a fair and reasonable price?
Yes, I do.
Okay, I really do appreciate this. You know, and so do 70% of voters, according to recent polling. And this is why Senator Sheehy and I are introducing the Warrior Right to Repair Act to make sure that every service follows the Army's lead of securing repair rights and requiring contractors to offer those rights at fair and reasonable prices. This is an opportunity to stand up for our sailors and Marines as well as for the taxpayers. And I look forward to working with you. I know that Senator Sheehy does as well. And we want to work with all of our colleagues to make sure that our service members have the tools they need to be able to repair their own equipment. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Warren. Secretary Phelan, have you had a chance, or has your team had a chance to look at the specifics of the language of the Warren-Sheehy bill that has been referred to?
I have not, Senator.
Okay, will you please do that and comment about the specifics on the record? It'd be very helpful to us.
Absolutely.
Thank you, and I look forward to working with my 2 colleagues on a workable solution, particularly since the Secretary is so supportive of that concept. Senator Ernst.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Secretary Phelan, Admiral Kilby, and General Smith for being here today and for your service to our nation. I'd like to start with a discussion on recruiting and ship manning. So, Secretary, we'll start with you. The Navy did meet its recruiting requirement in fiscal year 24, but even though it did that, we're still concerned about the top-line metrics when it comes to meeting the fleet needs. The fleet is still short roughly about 18,000 at-sea billets, and that's primarily among the junior enlisted ranks. And so, of course, we see the chronic undercrewing fatigue and, of course, the operational strain. So there was a GAO report in 2024 that flagged some really unusual or troubling data practices where our junior sailors are being counted in senior billets, which does inflate our readiness metrics. And I believe the report stated it was by 23%. So it does undermine transparency, and it makes it really difficult for us to do our congressional oversight. So, Secretary, what specific actions are you taking to close the manpower gap and restore the transparency in how the Navy is reporting its personnel readiness to Congress?
Thanks for the question, Senators. So I have not seen the GAO report. I will get it and come back to you with that, so I'm unaware of it. Transparency is something we are working on very hard. I've learned in my first 70 days here that if I don't ask the question and then the other 4 questions that are going to follow it, I don't get the information I need. So we need to be transparent with you. I'll ask Admiral Kilby maybe to comment on this specifically because I'm not specific around it, but I can just tell you in terms of the gaps that you mentioned, we were at about 23,000, I think 2 years ago, 20,000. We were hoping for fiscal year 25 to be at 18,000 in terms of shortage, but our recruiting numbers are up pretty significantly. I'd like to think we're going to exceed our targets this year. We've seen a real pretty big pop in that, so we're optimistic that we'll beat those numbers.
Thank you, Secretary. Admiral?
I just add to what the Secretary said. We really drained our reservoir, which is called the Delayed Entry Program, DEP, to 12%. It's now at 32%. We have exceeded our goals, and we need to continue to do that. And we need to continue to do that through 26, 27, 28, because it's going to it takes 9 months to get a recruit to a ship with no training. And so we're seeing that curve start to kick in. When we testified before the hack, we were at 23,200 gaps. Today, 22,900 gaps, so trending in the right direction. But we are focused on this every day. It is this, of the 3 things I worry about, it's number 2.
Okay, we've really got to close that up, and we'll follow up with you on that. General Smith, you have consistently within the Marine Corps met your recruiting goals. Can you talk about the success of the Marine Corps and how you've achieved that?
Senator, I can, and thanks for calling that out. I'm very proud of our Marine recruiters. The way we do it is Marines don't fail. We make our mission. We give our recruiters a mission. We hold them to account for that mission. Every month, they are required to recruit 3 individuals, and when they don't make it, we give them counseling, and if they continue to not make it, we replace them. Recruiting is our lifeblood. We place our best and our brightest on recruiting duty, and we reward them with a duty station preference, promotions, and awards when they do successfully complete their recruiting mission. And it's a simple fact, we're Marines, we don't fail.
Well, thank you. We do appreciate that, and thanks for meeting those recruiting goals and inspiring those generations that are joining into the Marine Corps. So I really appreciate that. I do have it's called the SERVE Act, and it provides a pipeline for young Americans to go into our service branches, and we hope we can get that included in this year's NDAA. I do want to talk very briefly, because I'm running out of time. I want to talk about auditing. Everybody's favorite topic. I love this topic. But Secretary Phelan, you pledged during your confirmation hearing to deliver a clean audit by 2028, and that is called for in our NDAA. I got my start in public service as a county auditor, so this is really exciting stuff to me. Yeah, everybody laughs, but it is. So the Marine Corps has achieved a clean audit not once, but twice. Which is very, very good. It proves really that success is possible when you have really good leadership that prioritizes it. So General Smith, what is the Marine Corps doing differently than our other service branches that has enabled you to meet this milestone, not just that once, but twice?
Well, Senator, thanks for calling that out. I'm very proud of my Marines and the Marine Corps for passing an audit 2 years in a row. I can't speak for the other services. I can only speak for Marines. We're accountable. We started at recruit training. We started officer candidate school. You're issued a shelter half, 5 tent pins, 3 tent poles, and a guide wire. And when you leave the unit, you're expected to turn in your shelter half, 5 tent pins, 3 tent poles, and a guide wire. And if you don't turn it in, we NJP you, non-judicial punishment you, or we allow you the opportunity to replace that using your own money. But we hold people accountable. And this is American tax money, and it's not ours to tinker with.
Yeah, as a logistician, I appreciate that. And Mr. Chairman, if I might, it may be over-exaggerated, but is it true that the Brits had said on your next joint training exercise, instead of sending your Marines, you send them your accountants?
I'm not going to swear to that, man, but that may have been said.
Really appreciate it. Thank you, gentlemen, very much.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Phelan, Admiral Kilby, General Smith, thank you for being here. Secretary Phelan, I want to take the opportunity to follow up on a question I had during your nomination hearing regarding the SLCM-N, the nuclear armed sea launch cruise missile. So during your nomination hearing, you stated you hadn't been fully read into the program, so you couldn't make an informed comment on the topic. Now, having been in the job for a few months and having looked at the program, I want to make sure we're clear on the direction of the system and understand the cost-benefit analysis in fielding this weapon system. If the Navy fields the SLCM-N, it would likely require removing conventional weapons off of the Virginia-class submarines, meaning torpedoes. And there'd also be required a whole host of significant structural and procedural changes aboard the boats, which would cost time, money, and sacrificing one of our greatest advantages that we have in the Western Pacific, which is our conventional submarine capability. So, Mr. Secretary, what do you think is more likely in Indo-PACOM in the Western Pacific, a conventional or a nuclear conflict?
Thanks, Senator Kelly, for the question. I think I'm going to defer to the Admiral on this one, since he is the military expert, as to how he thinks that's going to transpire. But what I would say to you as it relates to SLCM, still evaluating that, trying to evaluate candidly the entire force structure and posture, how our manned, unmanned should look like. What are the different programs we've got? I think we are seeing in real time combat changing very quickly.
Yeah, well, Mr. Secretary, I'll give you my opinion on this.
Please.
A conventional conflict is much more likely in the Western Pacific instead of a nuclear conflict. So do you think fielding a submarine with a tactical nuclear weapon capability will contribute to integrated deterrence inside the first island chain and in a Taiwan scenario?
Again, Senator, I think a lot depends on how that conflict takes place, what exactly they do, how we respond, and you could make the argument that SLCM gives the president more options. You could also argue it gives him less options.
All right, so let me transition here to Admiral Kilby. Admiral,
Do you think it's more likely we have a conventional or a nuclear conflict in the Western Pacific?
I think a conventional conflict is more likely, and I hope it stays that way.
Yeah, well, thank you. Do we have another option to field a tactical nuclear weapon at sea?
I think there's multiple options. It's hard to do all options at the same time in an affordable manner.
Well, let me ask you this, Admiral. Does it seem more complex and more complex and costly to integrate SLICM-N to a Virginia-class submarine, or would maybe a simpler and less costly option being a B-61 aboard an aircraft carrier?
I haven't studied the aircraft carrier position. I don't know the cost implications to create a nuclear program on an aircraft carrier. I know
But
we had
Admiral,
that.
is it true that in the 1990s we had B-61s and B-47s and B-57s, B-43s aboard aircraft carriers?
I believe so. And also some version of nuclear weapons on our surface ships, the capability as well.
And how do you, Admiral, how do you think the Russians and Chinese would respond if we did add SLICM-N to Virginia-class subs?
Well, I think they would have to consider it. I'm actually a proponent of that if we chose to do that.
Yeah, and I am not opposed to, having a tactical nuclear option at sea. My big concern is how it affects our conventional submarine force. We've got a significant overmatch with the Chinese, and this is kind of hard for me to say as a naval aviator that, our submarine force is probably our biggest overmatch. I'd like to think our airplanes are, but it's pretty clear to me our conventional submarine force is the overmatch that we currently need. And integrating SLICM-N to a Virginia-class submarine is incredibly complex. It's going to be costly, and I think it's going to cost us in our ability to, execute undersea conventional warfare against the Chinese or any adversary. And there are other options. B-61 was deployed aboard the aircraft carrier that I served on, and many others. And my sense is, I haven't studied it either, but my sense is, F-18s can carry B-61s, getting them aboard an aircraft carrier, if that's what we really want and need for deterrence, we could probably do that at a much reduced cost, and at the same time preserve the conventional submarine force that we have today. Thank you, Admiral.
Thank you very much. Senator Sullivan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, you don't have a lot of experience working with this committee, so I'd like to start with some basics. What does Article 1, Section 8, Clause 13 of the Constitution say?
I don't know. Why don't you tell me, Senator?
It grants the Congress the power to, quote, provide and maintain a Navy. And Clause 12 grants Congress the power to raise an Army. Do you know why the Founding Fathers had a difference between our constitutional responsibilities? It's a big difference. Raise an Army, provide and maintain a Navy. Do you know why?
I think I do, Senator, but why don't you give me the history lesson
go
you
ahead.
seem to want to do today?
Why don't you answer my question, Mr. Secretary? Do you want to answer the question?
I don't.
Wow, okay. It gives the Congress a longer-term view of building ships, developing infrastructure, supporting a much more permanent naval force than with the Army. Do you know which section of the Constitution mentions the Secretary of the Navy?
I do not, Senator. Why don't you go ahead and
Not
educate
mentioned
me
in this.
again?
It's not
Thank you.
mentioned in the Constitution. Let me provide a hypothetical. Congress passes a law. I've had many hearings on it. President signs it. Your experts come to you, say it's not one of your top priorities. What is your obligation to the law, Constitution, this body with regard to the law?
Sorry, can you repeat the question, Senator?
Congress passes a law. President signs it. Your experts come to you and say, what that law mandates is not one of our top priorities. What is your obligation to the law, Constitution, in this body with regard to that hypothetical?
I'm not sure what this is accomplishing, Senator, but at the end of the day, I follow the laws as
Good.
they're given to
Let me
me. How
provide
about
a
that?
real-world example.
Please do.
In that regard.
How
We had
about we
hearings-
talk
we had-
about our
we had-
call yesterday?
We
You
had,
wanna
we
talk
had
about that?
hearings to get to 31 amphibs in the law. Navy didn't like it, SecNav didn't like it, the Marines did like it. We passed that, requiring 31 amphibs. The law actually says the naval combat forces of the Navy shall include not less than 11 operational aircraft carriers, not less than 31 operational amphibious warships, of which not less than 10 shall be amphibious assault ships. Secretary of the Navy came here 2 years ago, and his shipbuilding plan, he didn't hit 31 amphibs at all. How do you think this committee responded to that?
Sure they didn't like it.
We didn't like it. Senator Kane and I put forward legislation that actually said the next year in the NDAA, very bipartisan, if the Navy doesn't hit its 30-year shipbuilding plan that maintains 31 amphibs, that we would sequester half of the Navy's budget. So do you think, and this is for all the gentlemen at the table, are we hitting 31 amphibs right now? Admiral, under the law?
I believe we are.
So my understanding is 3 of the 32 are not mission capable, 14 are out of reporting and in shipyards. So are we hitting 31 amphibs with those amphibs out of commission essentially?
By the letter of the law, we are. In intent, we're not.
Are those operational amphibious warships? That's the letter of the law.
When they come out of maintenance, they will be.
But 14 are in maintenance. So you think we're hitting that law right now?
Yes, sir.
General, do you think we're hitting that law? Let me give you one. One of the ships on that list is the USS Tortuga. It hasn't deployed since 2013. The Navy's counting that as meeting the law. Do you think that meets you were very involved in that 31 amphib law. Do you think that meets the letter of the law?
Senator, I can't speak to what meets the letter and intent of the law. I only can speak to the requirement of a 3.0 amphibious ready group presence, one in RMU off the East Coast, one off the West Coast, and the 31st.
Are we close to that right now?
Sir, we're not.
Okay. What are the combatant commanders saying they want? 3.0 or higher?
The combatant commanders are asking for 5.5, and I would note that that is unobtainium.
And we're not even at 3.0, and that's a requirement you think we need?
I believe as the amphibious requirements officer, 3.0 is the requirement. Yes, sir.
Okay. Mr. Secretary, when you went through your confirmation hearing, I highlighted a GAO report, had 4 recommendations, talked about the amphibious fleet readiness, which was in a state of disaster. Are you familiar with these 4 recommendations? Have you implemented any of them? And maybe you can get back to this committee with each of those recommendations and what you're doing to implement them from the GAO on getting our amphib fleet back in readiness.
Take that for the record and come back to you, Senator.
Finally, General, what happens if we don't have 3.0 MU toe-to-toe capability?
Senator, it increases risk for the combatant commander. That means there's not a Marine Expeditionary Unit off the coast of Africa should an embassy need to be evacuated or should Houthis need to be struck. It means there's not a Marine Expeditionary Unit prepared to go in the teeth of the PRC or prepared to operate in the Southcom AOR.
And are the Marines ready to be 3.0?
We are. So we have the capacity and the capability.
But the Navy isn't.
The amphib readiness rate is currently doesn't meet the 3.0 requirement.
Admiral, do you know when we're going to get to that?
I can tell you what we're at, 41%, and I want to get to 80%. I don't have an exact date when we're going to get there, but it has my full attention.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Sullivan. Senator Rosen.
Well, thank you, Chairman Wicker, for holding the hearing. I'd like to thank Secretary Phelan, Admiral Kilby, and General Smith for testifying today, and Admiral and General, thank you for your service to our nation. We appreciate it. I want to talk a little bit about Naval Air Station Phelan and modernization. So Secretary Phelan, as you know, the Nevada delegation has worked closely with the Navy, federal agencies, tribal governments, and local stakeholders. We've worked with them for years to secure the Phelan Range Training Complex modernization in the FY23 NDAA, expanding the range by over 600,000 acres to meet critical national security training needs. Now that the Navy's moving forward with modernization, I again want to underscore the importance of fully meeting the legal requirement that grazing permit holders who will no longer be able to use this land receive full and complete compensation for their lifetime losses. They will never use this land in Nevada again. Unfortunately, the initial payment offers the ranchers on the B-16 range. They've fallen well below expectations and estimated value. Appraisals must consider not only land value, but also FSA loans, groundwater access, and the lifetime worth of the lost business itself. So Secretary Phelan, thank you for your prior commitment to meet with me regarding the issue. I know our respective teams are working to schedule that as soon as possible. However, during your confirmation, you also committed to meeting with me and my team and some of the impacted stakeholders. So Churchill County and grazing permittees on the B-16 range, we need to meet with them. Will you commit to scheduling this meeting? I have a few others, so will you commit to scheduling this meeting with me and them as soon as possible?
Thanks, Senator. Appreciate the question. Yes, as I know we have an upcoming office call later this month, and I'm committed to visiting Phelan myself personally to see the operations and see local stakeholders.
So continuing on this, I want to reiterate that in your negotiations with impacted permittees, their grazing losses should be treated as a complete loss, not a buyout. This means, for example, valuing heads of cattle at full market value over time. My understanding is that the Navy's calculations continue to fall short of this. Will you commit to sharing with my team the specific calculation you're using to determine this value over time so we can discuss it?
Senator, I will look into these specifics and try to understand them better and come back to you with an answer.
Thank you. Does the Navy have the expertise needed to make this kind of determination and offer? Because it's critically important the permittees are made whole, and if your team does not have the tools and expertise to do this, or I don't hear back from you to work with us, Congress will need to look at providing you with additional guidance so that we can finally get this right. So do you have the expertise to make this kind of determination and offer to our cattle ranchers?
I believe we do, Senator, but I will confirm that.
Thank you. I'm going to stay on Phelan because it's so critical to our nation's security, safety, and of course really important to us in Nevada. So the remoteness of Naval Air Station Phelan, it's a major asset. Provides the range space that we need to ensure the fleet is deployable and operationally ready. The base has been designated as a remote duty installation since 1989, with the quality of life challenges that come along with that. NAS Phelan is the only Navy base in the continental United States designated as a critical housing area with housing in very short supply. So the vast majority of those stationed at Phelan live either in Reno or Carson City, which are each maybe an hour or over an hour away. The Navy anticipates entering into a public-private venture to build 172 new homes at Phelan, but more infrastructure is required to support them, enlarging the existing wastewater treatment plant, for example. So, Mr. Secretary, can you provide us an update on the status of that housing project, including timelines for supporting the infrastructure improvements such as building larger wastewater treatment plants?
Senator, I'll have to take that one for the record and get back to you.
We just want to be sure as you do that, that we want to be sure the Navy's planning to keep pace with infrastructure requirements such as housing, childcare, medical, and others as we support the growth of NAS Phelan. Quickly, I want to talk about the Phelan Range flooding because the Sheckler Reservoir outside of Phelan experienced more frequent overflows in the past decade, causing flooding to Phelan's B-16 range. It renders it inoperable for ground combat training. It's serious. The Bureau of Reclamation owns the reservoir. Its infrastructure and water flow impact the Navy, all while the Navy's investing millions into range modernization. So we have to work together. You have to work together with us and the Bureau of Reclamation to route the water around B-16 so that no longer floods the range. We need that range to keep us safe. It halts training. It risks flooding. Can you commit to us to working with the Bureau of Reclamation, my office, and obviously the Navy to get around this issue of flooding of the B-16 range?
Thanks for the question, Senator Phelan's obviously a critical range for us, and I'll commit to working with you to try to get this problem resolved.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Mr. Chair.
Senator Rosen. Senator Scott.
First, I want to thank each of you for being here. Thanks for your service. I also want to thank President Trump for doing everything he can to create some stability in California. It's really, I want to thank him for calling up the California National Guard and for having the Marines ready. It's disappointing that the governor of California and the mayor of Los Angeles is not as focused on the security of the citizens as our president is. Secretary Phelan, thank you for being here. During your confirmation hearing, you'll probably remember I showed you a picture of a rusty ship pulling into shore as an example of the ways the Navy has fallen behind during the Biden's term. I know you've made this a priority to get this fixed. I want to thank you for everything you're doing. Can you, well, let me give you some more facts. In the last 5 years, the Navy has taken delivery of 41 ships. Only 4 were delivered on time and on budget. So 4 were delivered on time and on budget. That's like under 10%. So you're a business guy. Both of us, if we had a 10% success rate, we wouldn't have been in business very long, and we wouldn't accept that from anybody that ever worked for us. So for Secretary Phelan and Admiral Kilby, can you give us, like, what are your top 3 things, each of you, that's going to improve the accountability of our shipbuilding? Whoever wants to go first.
Hey, sir, thanks for the question. One, I think the top 3 things we need to do is get the workforce right and stable. I agree with Secretary Phelan that we need an experienced workforce. We're seeing challenges at multiple yards, whether they're repair or shipyards. 2, for repair, we need to manage the package size so we can get it done in the time needed. Our delays are called in ship repair are caused by growth work, which means we discover something after the fact and the avail has begun. So I alluded earlier about doing those open inspects earlier, definitizing the package, and costing it out to do that work and not hope that we don't have to do those work. And then finally, I think there's some opportunities in the sparing accounts to do a better job, to have our parts available and ready when we need to do the avail, so we don't have a growth work because we're waiting for a part that's not readily available.
Secretary, you want to add anything?
Yeah, look, I think, Senator, what I've seen in 72 days here is we've got a big problem. And the problem is the following. Number one, we have underinvested in our infrastructure. We've underinvested in our maintenance. We've been maintaining ships at 50, 60% maintenance, which is not good. The bills for prior conflicts is where we've spent a lot of money. And that all those deferrals, all that underinvestment is coming due. So we have a very, very tough job in front of us in terms of trying to figure out how to appropriately allocate capital to these different areas. As it relates to shipbuilding, we do not have the capacity to handle the ships that we need to build today. Okay, and so we need to put all options on the table, because I think I bucket it in kind of 2 ways. There's short term, which is how do I get hulls in the water? How do I get them out of the yard? And then long term, how do I get this maritime industrial base growing? We probably need to add shipyards. We need to bring in expertise. We need to digitize a number of things and add technology to things. When I went to the foreign yards, again, I saw things that were far more advanced than what we were doing, and we need to start to implement those and add those. So
One thing, if you could do, is just as early as you can, give us a timeline of when you can do these things. So let me ask you one other thing. So I know we've talked about some of the issues the Navy's dealing with, and so the Marines and the Air Force are 100% recapitalized on their C-130s. The Navy needs over 30 C-130s, and unfortunately, they yet to have a program for this critical tactical airlift platform. I think they only have 1 on contract. So first, General Smith, how important are the C-130s for the Marine Corps and Joint Forces?
Senator, the C-130 is a workhorse. It's vital to be able to provide us organic mobility throughout the first island chain and globally. It's got global reach.
Okay, so Admiral Kilby and Secretary Phelan, tell me, is this a priority? And if it is, what's the timeline?
So it is a priority for the Navy. It's competing with a lot of other priorities. I'd say 50% of our C-130 fleet are C-130Ts, and then the other 50% are KC-130Js refueling. So it provides flexibility for us and is helpful for us kind of in that Pacific logistics challenge, but we are challenged with a lot of priorities, sir.
Will you be able to come back at some point and say, we got all these priorities, this is the list, this is when we're going to do, we're going to break these down one at a time, and this is how we're going to solve them? That would be helpful.
Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. A vote has started, and members will come and go. Senator Scott, you asked the Secretary for a timeline. I wonder if you could do that for the record. Would you try to get a timeline and supplement your testimony today?
Yes.
It'll be
sure.
easier the next time you testify.
Yes. I'll work on that.
Thank you both. So we're Peters now.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Phelan, I certainly appreciate your commitment during your nomination, Harry, to work with me to get the Constellation class frigate program back on track. As we discussed in that hearing, and as you mentioned to House appropriators, these delays are due in part, and I think to quote, to post-contract design modifications by the government. The Navy and the shipyard have collaboratively made progress to rectify these issues, including in design completion, production ramp, and workforce hiring, as well as retention. And I'm glad that congressionally provided industrial-based funding that I supported has helped in each of these areas. And I know that you saw this progress firsthand during your shipyard program review visit just last week. And while there, I understand you learned about the frigate's vital role in the future Navy mission requirements, as well as the Great Lakes region's valuable contributions to the U.S. shipbuilding industrial base. So my question for you, sir, is what are your plans for the frigate program in particular, and how can we maintain this positive progress to get this program finally back on track?
Thanks, Senator. I know this topic important to you. So I was at Fincantieri Marine 2 weeks ago. I was very impressed by the investments they've made in their shipyard and things they've done in an attempt to modernize. And I think there's some things that some of the other shipyards can actually take and potentially adapt. As it relates to the frigate program, I think as I've learned, I think the Navy has some culpability, as does the company, in terms of the problems we have. And I think it comes down to, candidly, in general, how we contract today. You're incented to just low bid and then come back to the government and ask for the fill-up. And we need to change that. As it relates to the frigate and in the force, still evaluating that. We're still trying to understand how it fits, when we can get it fixed, what the plans are for it. And so I will come see you as soon as we get a handle on that. But it is something we are looking at very hard. And I do think that the shipbuilder there has done a great job, and so we need to figure out how to keep that going and add to it and understand that.
Great. Well, I'll look forward to future conversations on it. I appreciate your attention to that. Admiral Kilby, as you know, Michigan plays a critical role in the U.S. maritime industrial base, leveraging really a century-long legacy of manufacturing excellence. Michigan has been a powerhouse of innovation and industrial grit, from the arsenal of democracy during World War II to supplying today's automotive and aerospace sectors, including land systems for the U.S. Army. We've also been investing in skill-intensive training and produce critical naval components. Michigan has created a national model for cultivating the next generation of engineers, builders, and maritime innovators. This effort, I think, gives Americans a decisive edge over our adversaries who are also seeking to dominate global sea lanes as well as technological development. So my question for you, sir, is how is the DoD supporting and utilizing regional manufacturing ecosystems like we have in Michigan to reduce the reliance on foreign suppliers for critical naval components?
Hey, sir, thanks for that question. I am not as familiar with Michigan as a site I went to visit in Senator Kane's state recently in Danville, Virginia. And that site has two purposes. One, it creates 5 trades, specific trades in 16 weeks, and it goes 24/7, so 3 sections, 900 people a day to go add to our defense industrial base. And it also has a additive manufacturing center of excellence, which is working to get the IP so we can produce those parts that are out of circulation because they belong to older systems. So I think that could be replicated in our nation. I don't know if it is in your state, sir. I'll check. But I think we need to do that as much as we can to add to our workforce to get it back to where it needs to be to maintain our ships, aircraft, and our military across our country.
Well, I'd like to work with you on that because Michigan is doing a lot of what you just described. So I'd like the Navy to have an opportunity to see and understand the contribution that the industrial workforce, which is highly trained, highly skilled in Michigan, and the advantages to deploying or employing them rather in Navy work. I'd certainly welcome that opportunity.
Yes, sir. I'll take advantage of that.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Tuberville.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick statement, Secretary Phelan. Everything we read, obviously, is China's using AI on almost everything that they do. They can build a bridge in 3 months. It takes us 3 years. I'm sure shipbuilding is part of that. In your travels, hopefully we're getting into that. I don't know how far and how impressed you have been with that. Any thoughts?
So, Senator, thanks for that. We're slowly adapting and getting there. I think that there's more that we need to do, and we're focused in the public shipyards trying to get that done. I saw at Fincantieri, actually, they have these 3D goggles where you can actually look at where they're welding and how it matches up versus the blueprint to make sure that they're not off, because the precision of this manufacturing is incredibly intense.
Yeah.
I mean, these are
Yeah.
very complicated things. So we're getting there, and I think implementing AI, even just basically digital twinning of projects, there are a number of things we have to do to get in and done that I think will speed up construction, make design faster. We spend way too much time in requirements and design. This needs to move much, much quicker. So streamlining that, I think, will be helpful as well, including that.
Just what I read, it looks like we're just falling farther and far behind, the Chinese, and we can't deal with that too much. General Smith, I'd like just to make a statement here and discuss to you about a constituent matter. Normally, this would be handled in emails and conversations between our staffs, and after more than 7 months of Headquarters Marine Corps being evasive and unresponsive to my questions, here we are. A little over 2 years ago, we had an F-35 crash in Charleston, South Carolina. The pilot, an Alabama constituent who entered service from my state, had been selected for a very important command and was in the process of converting from another aircraft and staying current for his new job. This mishap got a lot of attention because the pilot ejected. The aircraft continued to fly for an extended period of time before it eventually hit the ground. Of course, there was no way for the pilot to know that this would happen. If he had, he would have remained in the aircraft. What the pilot knew at the time was that the weather was bad, he had no visual reference with the ground, and his primary and secondary instruments had completely failed. Disoriented by the cascading failures and low to the ground, he ejected. The Marine Corps did what it always does. In these mishap situations, they had 3 investigations. One command investigation determined the mishap was in the line of duty and the pilot had committed any misconduct. It found no misconduct. A field flight performance board that focuses on pilot actions and abilities, and the safety investigation that is meant to determine the truth of the incident and provide a way forward and lessons learned to prevent future occurrences. All 3 investigations were completed February 2024. You know, this investigation and their summaries were routed to Headquarters Marine Corps, where it was determined that the pilot had acted appropriately and should continue his career. The pilot and his family were moved across country to Yuma, Arizona, and he took command in late June 2024, a year ago. General Smith, that July you visited the squadron, and while speaking with the pilot in his office, you asked him what his future plans were, stating, "We put you here for a reason, and the Marine Corps isn't done with you after this command." Then a month later, in August 2024, a redacted version of the command investigation was being prepared for public release. During that process, you apparently became familiar with this mishap for the first time, and without reviewing the other 2 investigations, directed that the VMX-1CO be relieved. It is important to emphasize that all information on this mishap and the investigation had been available to Headquarters Marine Corps for more than 8 months by this point, and it was also available when this family was moved across the country. During the video call relieving him, this Marine was told by the Deputy Commandant for Aviation that you've done nothing wrong. You're doing a great job, but the Commandant had decided you could not stay in command. I wonder what the reason were for this erratic and hasty decision. The officer who conducted the command investigation inappropriately offered his opinion. That mishap was caused by pilot error. Of course, it was incorrect. The mishap was caused by a never-before-seen series of failures. This erroneous opinion is what you justified breaking faith with this decorated combat vet for more than 33 years of combat service, because you never reviewed, obviously, the other investigation in detail, maybe at all. You didn't know or tell the different story of things that was said. Due to this unique circumstance of mishap, the board believes the pilot was justified in his decision to eject. Recovery from the previously described flight regime is not trained in the F-35 syllabus, and the FFPB believes that the predominance of naval aviators with similar experience of the F-35B would have made the same decision. This treatment of this pilot, to me, feels punitive and vindictive. There was no attempt by the Marine Corps to take care of this Marine or his family, despite his excellent performance as CO and the abundance of misconduct of any kind. This family was denied a change of command ceremony, even after the committee's professional staff requested you evaluate this decision. General Smith, I would like you to get answers to these questions I've been asking since October. I prefer it to happen through normal means instead of a hearing, but I am chairman of the committee's subcommittee on personnel, and we can arrange that. But to Trey and Jess Del Pizzo and their family, thank you for your many years of service and sacrifice to this great nation. I think you deserve much better here. There is no excuse to treat a Marine and his family this way, so I look forward to hearing from you, General Smith. Thank you.
Do you have a response to that, General?
Senator, I will get you everything I have on Cheese Del Pizzo's relief, but he was about to be the commanding officer of our Marine Aviation Weapons and Tactics Instructor Squadron, our premier squadron. And in all candor, sir, he punched out of a perfectly good airplane. And I can't allow an individual who punched out of a perfectly good airplane, a flyable airplane, to command our Marine Aviation and Weapons and Tactics Instructor Squadron. That is a flawless, no mistakes allowed command, and I couldn't allow him to take command of that squadron.
Thank you. Look forward to visiting with you. Thank you.
Senator, well, let's see, I'm not clear on who is. Senator Slotkin.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for being here. Commandant, thank you for being here. With everything going on in the country, I just want to give you the opportunity to talk a little bit. You know, the country is watching what's happening in LA. And first and foremost, if you use violence as a protester, you're no longer a peaceful protester, and you lose the right to be able to just destroy property, shoot at law enforcement, attack law enforcement, all those things. So people should be treated appropriately. But I think it is a different thing, particularly for our military, to be seen on the streets of American cities potentially adding fuel to the fire rather than decreasing it. I know that the Marines have been sent out. Have you had direct contact with LAPD leadership or the governor of California?
Senator, I have not.
Can you imagine if you were controlling some space? We've served together in many different places, you and I, and another armed force was coming to participate in actions with you, and you had not gotten a call from the commander?
Yes, Senator, I can't speak to what NORTHCOM has coordinated. The Marines there are under the auspices of the U.S. Northern Command.
Okay, well, I'd be interested to know if anyone has coordinated. Just pick up the phone so that we can try and have two groups of people who are, in theory, trying to do the same thing, coordinating. The reporting yesterday was that you all were scrambling, quote unquote, to figure out the rules of engagement, that you were sending folks without knowing what actual rules of engagement these Marines would be sent in with. Have they received any training on Miranda rights and custodial interrogation protocols? Do they have the ability to arrest?
Senator, they do not have the ability to arrest.
Great. Do they have any training on the use of less than lethal force in
Senator,
cities?
They do have training on less than lethal means.
On batons, on tasers,
Yes,
beanbag rounds, et cetera?
Yes,
How
but we
many
no longer
hours
use
of, what
We
did you
no
say?
longer use beanbag rounds.
Okay. How many hours of training have they received in less than lethal force? I mean, these are Marines, right? And when I served in Iraq, there was no one I wanted, no offense to anybody here, there was no one I wanted more protecting me than the Marines, whether I was in Ramadi or Fallujah or Baghdad or whatever. But that's very different than being active in American cities. So how many hours of less than lethal force have your Marines received in training?
Senator, I'll have to get back to you with an exact number, but it's in excess of 2 hours. That is a standard annual training in the use of non-lethal means.
So the LAPD folks who are out on the beat right now receive a minimum of 600 hours of training before they can be active in law enforcement. You can understand. And again, the problem for me is not, I don't question that these things in LA have gotten violent. That's not my question, and I condemn it. I'm worried about the reputation of the U.S. military in the United States of America. I think that you were designed, particularly Marines were designed, to be a lethal force abroad. And the idea that an apolitical military, which we all should cherish and value, are now going to be thrown into a situation that they're scrambling to participate in, where the LAPD says we don't need them, to create a dramatic story. I'm worried about what that will say about the U.S. military. And I speak from experience. In the city of Detroit in 1967, the Guard was brought in. It made violence worse. And literally 50 years later, people are still stressed about the U.S. military being active in that city. So do you think that the American public wants to see troops that were trained, active duty troops that were trained for lethal force abroad on their city streets?
Yes, Senator, I can't comment on what the American people want to see or don't want to see.
Well, I can imagine that most people are pretty disturbed by those pictures. And I've asked every single nominee who's come up in front of me here about this very issue because it was predictable. The president made clear he wanted to have this set of circumstances play out. It was in his Project 2025. He's talked about putting active duty troops in. And I am expecting leaders like you, who I know have deep integrity, to stand up for the U.S. military and saying that some of these missions, while we may figure out a way for them to be legal, don't support the reputation of the military that we need to uphold for the safety of this country. And we're counting on you. I yield back.
Thank you. Senator Duckworth.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to follow along on my colleague's chain of questioning. General Smith, I share her concerns and the concerns of the other members of this committee about the mobilization of the 700 Marines in response to the protests in Los Angeles. I am a Marine Corps family. My father, who lies at rest in Arlington, served in the United States Marine, only for a few years. He was an Army officer for the rest of the time, but that man was a Marine until the day he died.
Once a Marine, always a Marine, Senator.
Hoorah.
Hoorah.
Hoorah. And now, even if this is technically legal, what the president is doing, under an expansive interpretation of Article 2 authorities, I believe it is incredibly unwise. I don't condone violence or property destruction, but using active duty Marines for domestic protest response sets a dangerous precedent. When citizens around the country, not just in California, see Marines on the streets of America, it risks damaging their trust and politicizing a force that must remain apolitical and mission focused. President Trump is asking Marines to be away from their families for a situation that the president himself said yesterday was, and I quote, this is what he said yesterday, simmering but not very much, end quote. Do you, General, have any concerns about the moral injury of Marines who are now being tasked to face Americans and deploy their community in an unprecedented way? And what are you doing to address those mental health concerns?
Senator, Marines will execute their lawful orders. I don't have any concerns that about their moral damage. They're executing lawful orders that they're trained to do. They're completely confident and they're capable of conducting protection of federal personnel and federal property.
I have no question on their ability to do their jobs. They're Marines after all. My concern is the moral, the psychological injury to Marines who are going to be told to turn on their fellow Americans. We know, and would you agree that there can be hidden injuries such as mental health injuries to Marines, whether they're at war? I mean, when you go to war, would you agree that there are hidden injuries that can happen, such as psychological injuries?
There are psychological injuries when one goes to war, yes, ma'am.
Yes. Are you concerned that there might be psychological injuries to the Marines who are being told to turn on American citizens during this deployment?
Well, Senator, I would say that these Marines are not being told to turn on their fellow citizens. They're conducting federal property protection.
So you have no concern that there might be Marines that are having a psychological negative reaction to being put on. I'm not saying that they can't do their jobs. I'm saying you have no concerns and you're not preparing for any mental health counseling as a result of this deployment for these 700 Marines.
Senator, we always have mental health counseling available to Marines at all times for any purpose, but I don't have any heightened concerns about this.
Okay. Well, active duty troops are trained for war fighting and not policing. We ask a lot of different, very difficult things of our troops, taxing their mental health. And now we're sending them to turn on their own communities outside of their normal training. I would be concerned for the well-being of our heroes. I want to switch my line of questioning to Sealift and leveraging our international partners. There's a reason that our system is supposed to prevent the use of our military on our soil, except for the most necessary circumstances. Ideally, in coordination with local elected leaders, the alternative is un-American. From my perch on this committee and the Commerce Committee, changing topics a little bit, I am concerned about our military and commercial maritime capacity. I appreciate the leadership of many of my colleagues on this issue, and I strongly support ongoing efforts to expand our domestic shipbuilding industrial base. Even with this renewed emphasis on domestic shipbuilding, especially of commercial vessels or big-ticket military ships, I remain concerned that we are underinvesting in a critical element of any future fight, sea lift. It will not matter how many submarines or destroyers we can build if equipment, fuel, and resupply cannot make it to theater. And if our troops don't have enough ships to ferry each other and their resupply from place to place within the theater, and this is especially important for the Marines to have amphibious and local resources, I'd like to ask all of our witnesses, do you agree that we lack the necessary number of sea lift or auxiliary vessels to meet the logistical demands of a contested environment in the Indo-Pacific? Admiral, I'd like to start with you, and everybody on the panel, please respond.
I think we can do better there, ma'am. I'm not sure I would say we lack. I do think we've pursued a buy-used philosophy, and those used ships, at least the initial ones, took a lot more work to get them serviceable. The latest ones have been better, but I think a buy new and used philosophy is probably prudent going forward.
Do you think we could benefit from partnering with friendly foreign nations on co-production and co-sustainment of auxiliary vessels, from cargo ships to small supply boats to cable repair ships, et cetera, to build surge production and maintenance capacity within the theater?
I do, Senator, and I also think there's opportunities to bring that work into the United States.
Yeah, I think there's opportunity for both. Mr. Secretary?
I concur with the Admiral. I don't have really much to add to what he said.
What currently prevents the Navy from developing or scaling foreign partnerships to build or maintain our auxiliary vessels, Mr. Secretary?
Senator, look, I think there are a couple of different issues we have to tackle when it comes to those. But I think it's, as I said in my testimony during confirmation, all options are on the table, and we do need to look at this, and we do need to look at both having foreign builders build some ships like this for us, and also, obviously, they're coming here and looking at investing in our base and bringing their expertise. So I think that would be very useful to us.
Or even partnering with American builders, but overseas in theater to be able to provide immediate repair.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I understand that Senator Banks is almost here, so I'm going to do one question while we await him to arrive. And then following Senator Banks, we're going to adjourn this public portion of the hearing and reconvene in 15 minutes in the SCIF for the closed portion. And this is for Secretary Phelan, and it's just about something that I want you to make a priority. It's not really a question, it's the Brandon Act. The Brandon Act was passed by this body a number of years back, named after a young sailor, Brandon Caserta, who died by suicide in Norfolk. He was from Arizona, but he died while serving in Norfolk. And there were a lot of challenges and problems with, frankly, lack of access to mental health services. And it was a pivotal step toward improving access to mental health services, not just for Navy, but everybody in the service. The implementations across the armed forces, we've seen fits and starts, but some critical gaps in effectiveness: fragmented implementation, undefined procedures for mental health requests, lack of policies tailored toward the National Guard and Reserves. Probably we've done better in the active duty than the Guard Reserves. I would really love your help working to continue to implement this, and Admiral Kilby knows this story very, very well, and I appreciate your leadership on it in the past, but this is something that in the future I'll be checking in with you on to see what we can better do to implement the act. And with that, I will recognize Senator Banks. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for sticking around for me. Mr. Secretary, prior to President Trump's election, the military was struggling with the worst recruitment crisis in half a century. Now the Navy's on pace for its best recruitment in 2 decades, and I wonder if you can give us a good explanation about why.
Thank you, Senator, for the question. I think that there's been a big morale boost, both from the President's commitment to defense, the fact that we are changing the ethos and the culture of the military to more of its roots in war fighting. And I think in general, we've done a better job of explaining what it means to serve. We've done a better job of the skills you will get. And I think we've also helped, and this committee's been helpful in increasing compensation and closing the gap between the private sector and the public sector, which has made it better. I do think we do need to improve on housing and our barracks in order to maintain that. But I think both the Navy and the Marine Corps are set to exceed numbers and do better. And I would directly, at least right now, try to associate that with, from what we've seen in the data, the president's election and the focus. And to be honest, we've done a much better job of what the mission is and the importance of the mission.
Is it safe to say, Mr. Secretary, that recruitment improved after the election, after President Trump was elected? I mean, the numbers bear that out. It's sort of stunning to look at the last 4 years compared to the last 6 months.
We definitely saw a bump after the election.
And Admiral, what does that mean to the Navy for better recruitment and retention? I mean, how important is that? What does that mean to the whole United States Navy and your ability to do your job?
We absolutely have to recruit really beyond our goal to buy down our gaps at sea. I spoke earlier about we had last month at 23,200 gaps at sea. Now we're at 22,900 gaps at sea. So we've come back 300. But that only comes when you exceed your goal. If not, you're just treading water. So my view, sir, is that the Navy really turned around our focus on this area, as Secretary indicated, in the way we manage our recruiting machine and really try to incentivize our recruiters to not have monthly quotas, but to just bring everybody in we could. So we really took an all-hands-deck approach on this. And as I've said before, I'll ride any wave to get in someone who wants to serve in our country's Navy and do our work for our nation.
How do we keep it up?
Well, I think we have to keep looking at it every day. We cannot take our eye off the ball. The demographics are not in our favor here. One, we have a country that has less propensity to serve, and two, we're approaching a cliff where we're going to have a smaller population that we're all competing for. So we've got to make the value proposition that the Secretary talked about on why it's important to serve, why you will be fulfilled by a career in uniform, and then do the quality of service things the Secretary indicated to make them feel valued.
General, I mean, the last 4 years, the last 8 years, I served on the House Armed Services Committee, and I chaired the Military Personnel Subcommittee on HASC. Now I'm very proud to be a part of this institution and this committee. The one anomaly over the last 4 years was the Marine Corps. I mean, the Army, the Air Force, the Navy all fell way short of recruitment, the worst recruitment crisis since an all-volunteer force. But the Marine Corps held steady. I think it's because you all were selling something that was unique, what young men and women were looking forward to being a part of. What lessons can the other branches learn from the Marine Corps when it comes to recruitment?
Well, Senator, thanks for that question. What I would say that we put our recruiters out there and we offer the opportunity to earn the title Marine. We don't promise you anything. We offer you the opportunity to earn the title U.S. Marine. We place our best and our brightest on recruiting duty. We hold them accountable for their mission, and we reward them when they successfully complete it. I'm a former recruiter. My son is a current officer recruiter. We have multiple general officers, who are prior recruiters. General Turner, General Glenn, General Garcia. We have multiple officers who have done successfully on recruiting, and then we promote them. And so I think you have to do a combination of all of the above.
Yeah, I just offer one final thought. I mean, Secretary Hegseth, President Trump, this administration's focus on lethality and fighting and winning wars and preparing for that rather than politics and political causes. The recruitment numbers show that's what works. That's what young men and women are looking forward and inspired to be a part of. And I give this administration a lot of credit for that. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back. Thank you, Senator Banks. This concludes the open portion of today's hearing. I want to thank the witnesses for their candid testimony. For the information of members, questions for the record will be due to the committee within 2 business days of the conclusion of the hearing, and we would appreciate prompt and thorough responses. We will commence the closed portion of this hearing in Senate Security in 15 minutes. With that, we adjourn.